Good afternoon. My name is Annette Morgan, and I'm a loyal friend of the Kilgore College Piano Department and of Sandy Seiler and Jeannie Johnson, and also a former student of Realty B. Clyburn. First, before I make my remarks, I would like to congratulate each of the pianists on today's program and thank them again for their thrilling performances of the masterworks that we have heard. I'm honored today to have been invited to speak in tribute to an individual who called Kilgore his hometown, Kilgore College his alma mater, who was proud that he was a Texan with Southern roots, and never forgot the friends who knew and loved him years before the rest of the world knew his name. That person would be the namesake for the auditorium in which we are sitting this afternoon, Van Clyburn. The real challenge now for me is to make these remarks brief, since the task of capturing the essence of a legend in a few short minutes is a real challenge. It's far from easy. So I decided I would not worry about it. I have been worrying about the length of this, and I've decided I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to read this, because it's my story of my memories of the person that I knew. And I think some of all of us will be remembering them along the way as well. I would describe Van as a man of many facets, which he certainly was. Today, I want to talk about three of them: the musician, the statesman, and the friend. For those of you too young to know, Van Clyburn was born in Shreveport, Louisiana, but grew up in Kilgore, graduated from Kilgore High School, and attended Kilgore College before continuing his studies at the Juilliard School of Music. Until he entered Juilliard, his mother was his only teacher. Van would often describe her as his musical guide. In her own right, Mrs. Clyburn herself was an accomplished pianist who had studied with Arthur Friedheim, a student of Franz Liszt, at the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music. Childhood friends would describe Van as fun-loving, intellectually curious, sweet, and a boy with many gifts besides the obvious musical talent. By the age of 17, he did enter Juilliard, and Mrs. Clyburn, with her skillful and careful teaching, had prepared him for the career to come. All he really needed was exposure, because he had himself established himself as a piano prodigy in Texas. So during the next 4 years, he won every national major piano competition that he entered. After graduation from Juilliard, he began his concert career. So the stage was then set for the next chapter in Van's life, which would become an event in history unlike anything he had accomplished by a classical musician. In 1958, the U.S. and the Soviet Union were two established superpowers who were locked in a very real race for world domination. The atmosphere was what was called the Cold War, and was one filled with animosity, competition, and the threat of communism that many in America were fearful would take over the world. America and Russia used every opportunity to pit their strength against one another while the rest of the world looked on. The Russians had just succeeded in 1957 in successfully launching the very first spacecraft called Sputnik. It appeared that they were already beating us in the world of technology and the space effort. In 1958, the first international piano competition was being held, and Americans were actually invited to participate. I love this part of the story. Van was actually in Kilgore when his Juilliard piano instructor, Rosina Levine, wrote him a letter and asked him to please enter the competition. He had interrupted his concert schedule to come back home to take over Mrs. Clyburn's piano studio because she had fallen during a concert of Van's in Cleveland and had broken a vertebra in her back. So he was here in Kilgore. I remember it pretty well. Also, I love the fact that Van was really more excited about the opportunity to go to Russia and to see things that he had remembered being told about from childhood, and the landmarks, and he'd been told about the poets, the authors, the composers. So this was his first chance that he would get to see the country firsthand. So he was thrilled about that chance. The contestants were expected to play works from an extensive repertoire of music. During the first round of competition, the required list included works of Bach, Brahms, Mozart, Beethoven, Scriabin, Liszt, Rachmaninoff, and Tchaikovsky. What I love about this is that the significance of this is that Van already was a complete pianist who could play all music works so beautifully, not just the Russian composers. He became so well known for his interpretations of the Rachmaninoff Third Piano Concerto and the Tchaikovsky B-flat Concerto that they became his signature pieces. But the real truth was he had a full command of all the piano literature that he had played for years since he became a concert artist. And in that first round of competition, the jury made special comments about his playing of Bach and Mozart. This international jury was made up of 17 esteemed pianists and composers, 7 from Russia and 10 from every other country in the world, but not one American. The rest, of course, is history. He won first prize in that piano competition with a unanimous vote of the jury and made front-page headlines all over the world. When they asked the Premier Khrushchev about giving the prize to an American, he simply said, "Is he the best? If he is, then give it to him." He was then given a ticker-tape parade in New York and hailed as a returning hero. He had endeared himself to the Russians not only with his artistry, but with the charisma, charm, sensitivity, and genuine love of all peoples, and his way of expressing it through the international language of music. He loved them, and they loved him back, which is what made the difference. His own love for the human spirit and his fellow man and the music that bound all of them is what made the difference on that day, in that year, in that corner of the world. The door he opened that day in Russia could not have come at a better time, especially since no one thought they would allow an American to win. The fact that they did was a huge testament not only to his playing, but to his personality and charisma that transcended barriers and boundaries. Van was always proud of his country and that he was from Texas. Throughout his career, whether he played in our country or abroad,